We're finally ready to start, everyone. We're ready for the Masterclass. Adam's two biggest fans have arrived. They're in the wings. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Rock and Doll 2. A few people still squeezing in here at the end. The lucky 250 people here for the Masterclass. Something quite interesting about this Masterclass, powered by hydrogen. Normally they're fueled by whiskey. This one, powered by hydrogen. So speak up. Hey, morning! Hey! I'm not doing it a third time, so I hope it works. As I was saying, hydrogen is powering this Masterclass. So outside there is a big container of hydrogen. There is a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell, and a power pack. So this is being broadcast around the world using 100% renewable hydrogen technology, which is very, very cool. I'm going to follow it with the safety briefing. So, in case of fire, don't smoke, don't start fires, and if an alarm goes off, make your way safely and quickly to the nearest exit. If you pre-ordered, another bit of housekeeping, if you pre-ordered your Fishila bottle, collect it from the tent outside between 12:30 and 1:30 before you go down for the festivities. Now, that's working. Before we get to Adam and the drams and the exciting bit of the tasting, we've got some very exciting special VIP guests here today. Some long-serving members of the staff. And if you think about it, this is the 23rd Bruichladdich Festival, and in the front row here, and dotted around, there are a number of people who have been working here for 20 years or more, which is absolutely incredible. So please stand up. Alan Logan, Jonathan Carmichael, Chrissy Angus, Tina McKinnon, Duncan McFadgen, a.k.a. Budgie, Arlene McFadgen, Lynn McEwen, and Mary McGregor. And last but not least, and in fact, Budgie, who has been here probably 33 years? 34 years. 34 years. Now, over on this side, there's a famous face. The man who we call the final founder, the last founder, Simon Coughlin, who is here today, funnily enough, as one of the founders, has also been here for 23 years. Simon is threatening to retire at some point. I keep stringing it out, but he is threatening to retire at some point. So a very special thank you to Simon and his team of founders for everything that they've done. So I'm going to get off the stage and pass you over to the man of the moment, who's very excited to be here, I can see. He's desperate to get on stage. His girls are watching. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Adam Hannett.
Wow. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I can't tell you how excited I am to be. Slight in-joke there with the jacket. To ask Mr. Simon Coughlin about the story later on. Please do. Tell it very well. My goodness. 5 minutes since we were here last. It really doesn't. It's really nice to see everyone here. This might be the best looking audience we've ever had. And then I look round. I see these guys here who after are just, well, they're still smiling, so that's good. That's good. No, it's really, really nice to be up here again. I've got lots and lots of notes here, lots and lots of things to say. Douglas has said most of them already, so I'll have to get the pen out and sort a few things out here. But yeah, a little bit of housekeeping from me as well. This is a marathon, not a sprint, okay? 6 lovely drams in front of us. Some of these are quite strong, they're cask strength. Some of them straight from the still, so very high strength. To take them away, should you want to. So make sure you hydrate. If the toilets are outside, so please feel free. And what else have we got? Yeah, no heckling, please. Gee, I'm looking at you. And actually, it's really nice to see, Budgie here because typically when we have any kind of get-together at the distillery, we're halfway through and then Budgie arrives. So we did tell you it started at 10 o'clock this morning, so no, good to see you here. And then as Douglas, this is the very first Whiskey Masterclass run on hydrogen. And it's quite an exciting thing. It's run on hydrogen, and it's run, for me, on a week of sleep, a couple of drams before we started, and a little bit of coffee. So let's see how we get on. Now, the serious business or before we get to the serious business of whiskey tasting.
Sorry to interrupt. We need to get your power pack to the front of your bed, wherever it is.
To the front.
Talk amongst yourselves. That should stop your sounds tonight.
Is that better? Let's see how that goes. Right. So I'll do the same as Douglas. I'll back up on. Too late for that. No. So, before we get into serious business of tasting whiskey, a little shout out to the warehouse crew who have basically turned this into an amazing scene. You would think this is here all the time, but a couple of days ago we were filling casks over there, we were dumping casks over here, lots and lots of stuff going on. So big shout out to the warehouse guys for cleaning the floor, for making the place look immaculate and fitting 250 of you amazing people in here. So well done to those guys for getting it all ready. There'll be lots and lots of things like that to get clapping while I find out where we are in the speech, so we'll be fine. We've got 6 drams in front of us today. So these are very special drams. These aren't off-the-shelf drams you can get. You can only get those by coming to the masterclass here today. So I prepared these 6 drams, and what I've decided to do this year was kind of thinking about, again, we've got these kind of 7 long-serving guys with us today, and thinking about time. Time is really important with whiskey and reflecting on where you've come from, and then you know where to go in the future. You always must remember where you came from. That was something that Lynn, your father, used to tell me all the time. You've got to remember where you come from to know where you're going to go. So we're thinking about the past quite a lot. And so I decided that what we would do is we would taste a whiskey for every decade going back. Then I realized, I said we'd do 6 drams and we can only go back 5 decades. So we're going to start a little bit off with our festival bottle, our fish bottle, Bruichladdich. But it's really important, I think, again, to kind of think about some of the moments, particularly as we are with kind of 20-odd years in, with Simon's retirement in 4 or 5 years. We were thinking back about 2001, thinking about the passage of time. I think it's really important to do that, and I think when we reflect back on those inspirational moments and the people who shaped this company, which inspire us today, it's just really important to do that, to celebrate those kind of moments. Again, for me personally, I've been here for 18 years. I had a small gap. I joined in 2004, working with Mary in the shop. Left in 2005, came back in 2006. So I was trying to figure out if I would be 20 years next year, in which case I'll be sitting there and somebody else will be up here, or whether that year means I have to wait a little bit longer to do that. But yeah, thinking about that kind of that passage of time, and my kind of opportunity to work here, I just want to say a big thank you to Simon and of course for Jim and the whole kind of team. We wouldn't be stood here, or I wouldn't be stood here today. We wouldn't be in here today if it wasn't for that vision back in 2000 and that will to do something different. And hopefully we'll touch on some of those things that still inspire us today through the rest of the tasting. But yeah, Simon, a big thank you for me personally for getting us to where we are today. So thank you. Now, the next section here was all about introducing Chrissy and Jonathan and Alan and everyone, but Douglas already done that. But I do think that after 20 years of working at Bruichladdich, 20 plus in some cases, and this is the reward, I would imagine that actually they wouldn't have been here. They'd have left years ago if they knew this is what was going to happen after 20 years. But it's incredible. Yeah, so Chrissy, export and dispatch manager, 22 years. Jonathan Carmichael, bottling hall manager, 22 years. Alan Logan, production director, 22 years. Arlene McFadgen, I was going to say production director again, sorry. Bottling hall supervisor, another 20 years. Tina McLeod, another 20 years, bottling hall supervisor. Lynn, global marketing manager, 20 years again. Mary, private client manager, 20 years. Budgie, 34 years. It's incredible. Oh, forgetting anyone. Simon, of course, 23 years. It is an incredible thing. I've not worked here for 20 years, but I've worked with you guys for a long time. And, it's quite important to think about, for me, that people want to stay here for that long. The company, the way we do things is incredible. And I mentioned there when I had joined in 2004 and I worked with Mary and I was doing tours in the shop. And, I born and raised in Islay. Didn't know a thing about whiskey because it was everywhere. You took it for granted. And when I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to work at Bruichladdich, I fell in love with whiskey immediately. The passion, the team, the way that Bruichladdich operated just appealed to me, and I just, again, loved it. I loved telling the story. And then after a year or so, I decided to leave the distillery and then realized I'd made a very silly mistake. And yeah, off I went into the wide world. But an opportunity to come back happened in 2006. And so I took that opportunity, but it wasn't quite that straightforward. I was working as a landscape gardener. So I was out cutting grass, having a lovely time, everything was fantastic, but that business was not doing very well, and so I had to look for other opportunities. And I applied for a job at another distillery, so not Bruichladdich, another distillery, and I went and did the interview, and it was kind of my kind of first interview I'd really done, and it was very nerve-wracking, and I didn't think I'd done very well. Went home, and later on that night, I got a phone call, and I was offered the job. And so as I was speaking to the distillery manager on the phone as he was offering me the job, and of course, bearing in mind I have a very hard physical job in a business that's about to go bust, I said, no, thank you, it's okay. I don't want to take the job. Because it wasn't Bruichladdich. And so I hung up the phone, realized I'd made another silly mistake. I probably should have taken that job. But I knew it didn't feel right, because when I'd gone round and I'd done the interview and I had a look around the distillery, everything was amazing. But it didn't have that same feel that I'd had here in the early days of Bruichladdich, those days of working with Jim and Simon and Duncan, and just that spirit of kind of resurrection, getting the distillery back up and going. We had no money, we had nothing, but we had passion, we had this will to make it work. And I knew I was playing my part in that, and I felt really, really passionate about that. And I missed the people, I missed being part of what was, something good that was happening at Bruichladdich. So I turned down this other job, and I came back to Bruichladdich, and I said to Simon and Jim, look, is there any work you've got for a little while? And I got 3 months work leading up to the festival. You'll see later on, the festival is amazing. The team have put in, there's a huge amount of effort gone into this, a huge amount of effort. Everything is amazing. And in those days, we used to do the same thing. We would put so much effort into it, but it took months to get everything up and ready. So I got 3 months work to help out. I'm still here. So it's been a long 3 months, but so I was very, very lucky. But I think there's something about what we've created here at Bruichladdich, which is really special. It is really inspirational. I still feel it today. And again, it's thinking about that, those times, again, thinking about the past and looking to the future, that if we hold that in us, that again, you know, you guys are 20 years plus, you know, I'm coming up for that, and I don't see myself going anywhere anytime soon, unless Douglas has any other ideas. But I think what we're building here, what we have built at Bruichladdich, and what we'll continue to do is exciting, it's interesting, it's about passion, and it's really great to see that people, you guys, are with us for so long. So, yeah, thank you very much, guys, again. So you'll get the theme here. I'm going to do lots of talking and then forget to tell you to drink. So should we have a dram? Yeah? So on our tasting mats in front of us, there's 6 glasses. If you start in the top left, glass number 1, you see on the mat they're all numbered. So the first dram we have is one of our 2 fish bottles this year. So this is our Bruichladdich Rock'n'Roll 2.1. This is a beautiful whiskey. And again, please have a nose, have a taste. Don't wait for me to tell you to taste, okay? Because you'll get very thirsty. But I'll tell you a few things about the whiskey, and we can kind of touch on some of the taste notes as we go. Let me turn the page here. So celebrating, basically, our festival day. And back in November last year, Lynn and I were having a conversation. She's like, right, we need to get the festival bottles. We need to figure out what we're doing. What are we going to do? I went, right. Well, do you know what? If we can do anything, well, let's think about some of our favorite whiskies, because we just want to enjoy good whiskey, don't we? So let's think about our favorite whiskies. And we've obviously talked many times about what's our favorite expressions of Bruichladdich, and it was Alan, Lynn, and myself. We were always very, very fond of the old Bruichladdich second edition, the 15-year-old second edition. So back in the early days, 15-year-olds, and then we did second edition, and it was aced. It had this extra aging in Sauterne casks. So I thought, let's see what we can make something like that. So it's not identical. You know, we're a year older. This is 16-year-old Bruichladdich, 2006 vintage. But let me tell you some of the details, because that's really, really important to think about here. I've already gone off piste. I've already lost myself place in the notes, so just you talk amongst yourselves while I get ready. No, so this is 2006 vintage. There's 16 casks I selected to bring together for this. 12 of them are organically grown barley. First fill bourbon cask matured. This whiskey was married, blended, if you like, with 4 casks of second fill Sauterne. So back in 2006, when I started working back in the warehouse, we filled a range of casks a range of Sauterne casks, and they had been used once before. So we filled them as a second fill with new spirit. So that has been the whiskey has been in there for those 16 years. And then at the beginning of this year, we married these casks together, and we put them back into wood to mature. So we have a lovely expression of Bruichladdich. We've got that lovely, the organic barley gives us a nice freshness. You get that lovely kind of classic fruity Bruichladdich style. And then we add a little bit of magic. We supercharge it with a little bit of Sauterne. So from those sweet wine casks, we're getting lots of kind of ripe fruit flavors. We're getting a really nice balance of the French oak. From that second fill, it's not going to be too dominant because we've used the cask once before. So second fill cask works really, really nicely. Now this is at 50% alcohol as well. So we're starting quite gentle, 50%, because it is still the morning, okay? So 50% alcohol. Let me find my place, excuse me. I was going to tell you about all the whiskies we were going to taste. That was the next thing I was going to do, but we haven't got time. We'll just go into the first one here. So as I say, we don't have 6 decades worth of whiskey, so we'll start with this one. We also have a Port Charlotte 2006. So this year, again, with our rock and roll theme, we have our Bruichladdich 2006 and a Port Charlotte 2006. And with the Bruichladdich, that light, elegant, unpeated spirit, The bourbon and the Sauterne cask work beautifully and highlight all those amazing flavors from the spirit. With the Port Charlotte, that heavily peated 40 ppm spirit, gone a little bit different. Okay, so we've got a little bit more sherry, a little bit more wine cask, a little bit darker, richer fruit flavors to kind of really work with that peat. So we're not going to taste that right now. You guys can taste that later on in the rest of the day. But you are the very first people to taste this whiskey here. So I think we should probably have a little taste. See what we think. Slanger, everybody. Wow. Give that a little bit of time. Well, that is a beautiful whiskey. When we think about whiskey, and we think about what we do at Bruichladdich, if you guys give that a little bit of movement in the glass, and you just watch, and you'll start to see the legs, you'll start to see the teardrops coming down the glass, and you can see it takes a long time. They're wide, they're thick, they're oily, they're viscous. So they're just starting to come down now. I mean, you can see that viscosity, that texture, and you've still got those oils, that taste on your palate at the moment, I'm sure. I do. So when we think about this whiskey and that texture, and we think about that organically grown barley and the oils from that barley and the flavors we're getting, we're carrying all that through. Of course, these kind of important principles that were set back in 2001, how we make whiskey. We're not going to chill filter this whiskey, and we're not going to add any artificial color. This color has come from the bourbon barrels and those second fill French oak Sauterne casks, and it's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. When we nose that, again at 50%, you've got that lovely fruit. So the reason, again, we chose this particular age and why some obviously whiskey aficionados like Lynn, Alan, myself, why we wanted that 15-year-old is because Bruichladdich is always very good around that kind of 15 to 20-year-old mark. It's always good anyway, but there's always this little peak, this little highlight at that kind of age. It always seems to just have this lovely balance of oak, this lovely balance of fruit from the distillation, and the lovely balance of fruit as that ages into initially kind of the young spirit will be quite fruity and kind of apple, pear, gooseberry, kind of ripe green fruit. As it ages, we'll start to move into kind of more tropical, more stone fruit, apricots, peaches, mangoes, that kind of thing. So we've got that in here. You've got that lovely apple, you've got that citrus, that kind of lemon marine kind of note. And definitely that kind of peach and apricot kind of style. So that's absolutely great. And again, the Sauterne casks, we're going to get that ripe fruit coming from them as well. We just highlight that a little bit more. So this is just absolutely, for me, an incredible example of what Bruichladdich is. I think it's an absolutely beautiful whiskey. One of the lovely things about this as well is when you nose that, and I'm just getting it there, is you've got this lovely minerality, this lovely kind of you get it on the palate. It's got this lovely kind of freshness, this ozone freshness. Of course, we mature all our whiskey here, surrounding us right here. All of that Islay air, all of that kind of Islay influence in our whiskey is really, really important to us. Again, one of those founding principles, one of those founding ideas about how we make our whiskey is that we want it to have a sense of place. We want it to be from Bruichladdich. We write Bruichladdich on the label, on the tin. It should stay here. We distill it, we mature it, we bottle it, all here. Really, really important to do that as well. So these kind of principles that we've stuck to that have shaped the distillery, again, you can taste that, you can feel that in the whiskey with that minerality, that lovely ozone freshness. So a tremendous, tremendous whiskey. I think one thing that we should probably look at, and I'm going to need a bit of audience participation here. So hopefully you haven't all finished your drams yet. And if you have, you just have to watch the person next to you who hasn't. When I was talking about those oils, and this again, I can do this and I'll be able to see it, but you guys at the back won't be able to see what I'm doing. So what I want you to do, if you have whiskey left in your glass, is just to tilt the glass on its side a little bit like that and take some water. And we're going to add a little bit of water to the whiskey. And of course, it's always good to do that. It opens out the flavors, adds a little something. But when we do it, when we think about those kind of principles that we have at Bruichladdich, that non-chill filtration, why do we do that? Or not do that? Why do we not chill filter our whiskey? Chill filtration, again, I'm sure you guys are all aware of this, but just for anyone in the room who isn't quite sure, chill filtration is a process where you strip the natural oils out of the whiskey so that when you add ice or water to a whiskey later on, nothing happens. Because when you mix oil and water, there's a reaction. So a lot of companies will strip it out. Their whiskey is stable. And then when they reduce it down to 40%, there's no oils in there to react with it. We bottle it 50%. We can't go as low without it going cloudy, but also 50% is the best flavor profile. So we get the best balance of flavor in our whiskey. Well, let's see what happens when we add the water to a non-chill filtered whiskey. If you take your glass on the side a little bit there, hopefully you guys are still holding it there, yeah? Nobody put it down. So we'll put our glass on the side, and we're going to add a little bit of water. We're going to add it really gently, slowly. Just trickle it down the side of the glass, and what you should see, if you do it nice and slowly, is the water goes down the side of the glass, down to the bottom. You'll see the way that some of the oils and the water react. It goes hazy. You get these lovely things. And then if you've done it slowly enough and the water's gone to the bottom, and the oil will start to come to the top. Because we're not agitating it, we're not mixing it, and we have what we call the band of gold. So when you're around at your friends, you're having a few drams, you're kind of talking about whiskey. This is a really cool thing to do. This is a nice little party trick. You can see the band of gold. And you can only do this with a non-chill filtered whiskey like Bruichladdich. So that oil is floating on the top. And again, I'm sure that maybe some people in the front can see that. Maybe you guys at the back can't, but you can see it with your own. The oil is on the top, and that cloudy kind of whiskey and water mixes at the bottom. And if you just dip your finger in the top, and you take that oil out, the drop doesn't fall. And we'll just wait and see what happens, how long it takes. The last time I did this was about 3 days, so you're gonna miss a few more open days now. If you take the water at the bottom, it drips off. So again, these things are really, really important when we think about whiskey. We think about the quality of what we do, how we do things here. Things like having that band of gold, those oils in the whiskey are really, really important. That's why you've all still got the flavor on your palate. I have it. I've still got the flavor in that whiskey. I tasted it 5 minutes ago. I've still got that on my palate because the oils are there. It's really, really important that we think about the quality of whiskey. And that's one of the things, again, that from day one, we've always put at the front of what we do. So that's why that whiskey tastes so good, why all our whiskeys taste so good. Yeah. One of our two festival whiskies, of course, we make lots of different types of whiskey. So we have Bruichladdich here, the Port Charlotte. We'll have Octomore, of course, as well. We make botanist gin. We have a lot of different personalities, a lot of different expressions. We want to explore different things. That's quite unusual in whiskey. Those kind of pushing the boundaries, those kind of things. And again, that was from day one. Those kind of founding principles, pushing the boundaries, trying new things. And we've always done that. And our next whiskey, because yes, it is 25 to 12, and we're going to move on to our second whiskey. We're going to have to hurry up, guys. Come on, stop getting me chatting. Come on, we need to keep going. Our next whiskey is going to be quite interesting. Our next whiskey is actually not a whiskey yet. This is 1-year-old spirit. So glass number 2, the top row in the middle, glass number 2 is 1-year-old spirit. This is quite interesting. Okay, so this is us thinking about our first decade. So in the 2020s, we've gone 2022. The kind of eagle-eyed amongst you will see that I have 7 glasses here. I saw that. You did see that. Nothing gets past Lynn McEwen, nothing at all. Why do I have 7 glasses and why do you have 6 glasses? Because I'm the head distiller and you're not. No, sorry. That's not written down. Sorry, that's not, it's just. So, very early on, I had 6 drams, but of course, we're always interested in trying new things, always thinking, always kind of pushing the boundaries, all this kind of stuff. So, about a week ago, when I was drawing all the samples for all of these whiskies, and I was drawing a sample of new spirit to tell you and to be able to discuss and talk about the quality of our new spirit and the distillation, I thought, do you know what? I could make it a bit more complicated. We could do a compare and contrast, because it's great to taste the new spirit. It's not something you get to do very often, distilleries taste new spirit. And when you taste the spirit off the still, you're tasting that kind of rawness. There's no influence of the wood. You're just tasting the quality of how the mashermen and the stillmen are working, how we're taking our cuts, what is the base spirit that we start with. Because if you start with something good, it only gets better. So we always think about making our spirit this amazing quality. We do things slowly, trickle distillation. Again, these principles of doing things the right way. And I thought to myself, we could just taste that. But for the last kind of 10 years or so, we've been working on what we call our regional trials, which is a program where we take the same variety of barley grown on specific single farms in different areas of the country to see if there's any change in flavor or difference in flavor from these farms in the new spirit. So we first did this back in 2013. So 2013, we worked with some farmers on the mainland of Scotland to grow barley for us, the same variety, different farms, and then we would keep that barley separate all the way through the process. So we had a farm up in the Black Isle. The Jacks, who farm up in Black Isle, were growing for us. A guy called Colin Tuch up in Aberdeenshire, Barnyards of Dalgetty is his farm. He was growing for us. And Tom Laurie, Ransfield, just outside Edinburgh, he was growing for us. So the same variety of barley was planted. They took that barley to the maltings. It was kept completely separate and malted as its own batch. It came to the distillery. We kept it completely separate. When it went through our process, there was no contamination at any point. Even the faints in the distillation, we started from scratch. We started with nothing, so we weren't mixing anything else in there. And we did this to see what the flavor would be like. Now, we were told, and the industry will tell you that, or most of the industry will tell you, it doesn't matter where the barley comes from. You're going to mash it, you're going to distill it twice, you're going to kind of lose any kind of influence of flavor. We don't believe that's true. So we did it ourselves. We went out and we started working with these growers, working with the maltings to be able to identify the single farms, make very, very specific new make spirit. So, of course, I wanted to let you guys taste this. But I've already said we're going to do 6 drams. We haven't got enough glasses to do 7 drams. So, this is where we start to work together. And I didn't tell the guys that we were pouring this until this morning, so there was lots of panic around this morning. Dram number 2, Johnny and everyone on that first seat over there has new spirit distilled from Aberdeenshire grown barley. Amy and everyone in the second seat has Lothian grown barley. And then we alternate. So Tina, you're in Aberdeen. Jonathan, you're on Lothian. Richie, you're in Aberdeen. Lynn, you're on Lothian. And we'll go all the way across. So the person sitting next to you has something different in their glass to you. So, when you're nosing, you're going to have to work together, share a little bit. But what I want you to do, and to be honest, it doesn't matter which one you've got. Because if you're working with your friends next to you, you've got something different. Aberdeenshire, Lothian. Aberdeenshire, Lothian. I'll give you a moment to figure this one out. So I'm sensing a little bit of interesting conversation going on. The main question I want to ask you guys is, having given you a little moment there to taste, compare, contrast. Is there a difference in those new spirits? Yeah? Yeah? So we've proved it. There is a difference. There is a difference. Now, I think that's really, really interesting. I think that's really, really important. It's a very Bruichladdich thing to do, to take that same variety of barley, grow it in different things. So the only difference that's influencing these flavors is the soil and the climate, the terroir, in which that barley has grown. Now, they are not completely different. You recognize them as being very similar. When we distill Bruichladdich, the flavors we expect to get off the still when Budgies stood there at the still at 3 o'clock in the morning or whenever it is, the flavors we get in the new spirit, we'll be able to nose here. So we get a lot of light, elegant, floral, fruity notes. I'm getting lots of kind of gooseberry, lots of apple, pear, like ripe green pears. Those floral notes really coming through, so it's like honeysuckle. And there's a lovely cereal note as well. So those cereal notes in Bruichladdich, of course, are coming from the barley, they're coming from the grain. Got these lovely, lovely cereal notes coming through. So you get that porridge, that digestive biscuit, you know, that kind of malt, Guys, I knew this was a bad idea. It's too much discussion. Too much discussion going on. My goodness. Will I give you 5 minutes? Will I give you 5 minutes? No, it's really, really good. It's really good that everyone's interested in discussing this and finding the differences. Pardon? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, enough discussion. That's it. Quiet. Quiet. This is not meant to be enjoyable. This is a serious business, okay? No chatting amongst yourselves. I want attention being paid, please. Thank you very much. The reason I've given you these samples to say is to think about the difference, the idea of terroir. But it's these little differences that are so important in making whiskey. When we taste those spirits, we can recognize the similarities, more than the differences, but the differences we can detect, okay? It's 1%. These little 1%, and I've always said this with whiskey, and all the things we've talked about so far, the chill filtration, the caramel coloring, you know, where the barley comes from, the variety of barley, all of these little things, the trickle distillation. You'll make great whiskey without doing those things to the extreme that we do. But because we make sure that we mature all our whiskey in Islay, because we want to know where all our barley comes from, because we use Islay spring water when we bottle, because we bottle at a strength that really suits our spirit, all these little 1% start to add up all the way through our whiskey. So all these little 1% are really, really important. The difference to know whether it was grown on a farm outside Edinburgh or a farm up in Aberdeenshire, to be able to know the farmers, to be able to think about that, they're little differences. But when I'm going through the warehouses and I'm looking in a sampling cask and taking things out, knowing that it's from Aberdeenshire, I know what to expect from the Aberdeenshire barley. And then you add that to the Lothian barley, and you add that to the Black Isle, and you add that to the organic, and you add that to the Bear barley, and all of a sudden, the breadth of flavor you're able to create in Classic is huge. And we think about the cask types we use and all these different things. All these little 1%, all these little differences add up to make our whiskey better. So that's why we explore all these things. That's why we want to explore these things. We don't just say to you, Barley, doesn't matter where it comes from. It's a commodity. It's something that, you know what, we're just going to mash it. We're going to run it through the mill. We're going to mash it. We're going to ferment it. We're going to fry it through the stills twice. You're going to lose any difference there. We think of it differently. That process concentrates the flavor. That process gives us those differences. You can taste it. Assuming it's the person next to you shared. You can taste it. And that's why I wanted you to taste those whiskies. That's why I wanted to select those two whiskies, to be able to let you taste and see the difference. And that's a really, really important thing. So, dram number 3? Yeah? We might have a question.
What was the ABV on these two?
Good question. Good question. So the ABV on those samples, the new make spirit, was 68.5%. So thank you for asking the question. It's a very good question, because somewhere in those notes was a little point to talk about the quality of spirit, and actually the fact that we can sit here and taste something that's 68.5% alcohol. So when we fill our casks, when the spirit comes off the still, we don't add any water before we fill it into casks. Because Budgie and the rest of the guys know how to run those stills. They make amazing whiskey. We're not pushing anything, running fast. We're just making good whiskey. So you can drink it straight off the still. I mean, sure, it's strong. I mean, you knows that. You pick up that strength, that prickle, but it's not aggressive. And actually, you get a lot of those flavors coming through. You know? We have a little taste. Yeah, you can feel the strength. You can feel that spiciness, that heat, but it's not aggressive. And when you swallow, it's not burning all the way down. It's not something, you think 68% alcohol is going to be lethal. It's not. It's gentle. It's sweet. It's got this amazing texture, that viscosity, that oil. It's amazing. And that's a testament to what we do here at Bruichladdich and what Budgie and the team do. They make amazing whiskey. You can drink it at 1 year old, at 0 years old, straight from the still, amazing texture. So if you think when we put that into a barrel, sure, it's strong, but it's really good. It's only going to get better as it matures. We start from a good place and we go better. So again, these little 1%, running that still slowly, taking the right cuts, not being greedy. We're not trying to make whiskey for the world. We're trying to make the best whiskey that we can. So Felipe, thank you very much for asking that question. And if you want to check through the notes and point out any other bits I've missed, that would be great. Well, no, we'll move on to dram number 3, because I think it's the Kalila open day tomorrow, so we need to be ready to go over there. We're going to be here a long time. Do you know, I was up all night worrying about how long, I thought I'd be finished in about 20 minutes. I don't think that's going to be the case, is it? Goodness me. Dram number 3, you have in front of you. Dram number 3 is very special. Of course, they're all very, very special. But when we think about what we've just talked about with where our barley comes from, dram number 3 is very special to me. I threw this one in here because I really like making whiskey from Islay-grown barley. Okay, so this is a 2012 vintage. So again, we're going back another decade to the 2010s. I think that's what you call that decade, 2010s. It is now. 2012, Islay-grown barley. So this is quite an interesting whiskey because it's 11 years old. It came from, drew the samples down in the Port Charlotte warehouses, and there's a mixture of bourbon cask, first fill bourbon, and some second fill virgin oak. Is it still virgin oak if you've used it before? That's a whole other category. But the casks were new made. We used them for our whiskey, and then we filled them again. So second fill, virgin oak. Some bourbon, and again, you can see that lovely color, that beautiful influence. Again, just nose and taste and have a go as I talk about this. But again, what you'll notice is really different character. A real earthiness, a real kind of lovely kind of depth of flavor coming through there. This, Felipe, this is 60.1% alcohol. So again, I haven't added any water here. This is the natural strength, 60% alcohol. So again, let's have a little taste. Does that taste like it's 60% alcohol? It's beautiful. It's really smooth. It's got that lovely texture. It's not aggressive. It's gentle. And it's got this lovely minerality again. It's got that lovely Bruichladdich character. But you can sense there's something different about it. That Islay barley, you think about what we've just talked about, where the barley comes from, it makes a difference. Growing barley on Islay makes a huge difference to the quality of that barley. It makes a huge difference to the flavor of the whiskey that we make. But there's something lovely about the way we bottle this whiskey. And this whiskey, I chose this whiskey for another reason. We've already released our 2012 Islay barley. And there's something quite nice about that obviously we've worked with the growers, the farmers. So Alan will have been working with the growers back in 2011 when this barley was grown. And then we distilled in 2012. So Alan will be working with those guys. Of course, then goes on to Budgie and he'll run that through the stills. Into the warehouses here, and then obviously think about releasing. Len and I have been working on, Len will have been working on all the packaging and the design and all the information coming through about that product. Arlene and Tina will be there bottling it. Jonathan there as well, making sure it's going around the world with Chrissy. So this team effort to get this whiskey out there is a really nice moment, a really nice thing. This is something we've all worked on and been able to release. I think that's a really nice thing. It was pointed out to me at dinner last night that when we release a whiskey, it's my name that goes on it, and I get all the glory, which is great. But it is a team effort. It's not me that does everything here. This is really, really important to think about. The enormous team we have here at Bruichladdich working really, really hard. So yeah, it's an amazing whiskey, and it's for me the provenance of it. It tastes amazing. I mean, have another little taste of that. 60%, it's so soft and gentle. Absolutely incredible. And that sweetness and that fruit and the way that oak is working really, really nicely with the fruit and the spirit. Absolutely incredible. And if you knew nothing about that whiskey, it doesn't matter because it's just really, really delicious. But see, when you're at home and let's say it's Saturday night, you're having a dram, couple of friends round, you have open up a nice bottle of something, and you're having a nice conversation, and you're not really talking about the whiskey that much. It's just a nice evening. The whiskey's great. Everything's fantastic. There's something, again, that just raises that experience a little bit higher. When you know, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes here, when you know that back in 2011, Alistair Torrance at Mullindry, Raymond Stewart, Sunderland, Mark French at Rockside, Donald Jones at Cool, Raymond Fletcher at Dunlosser, the late Ian McKerrow at Island Farm, Ian Torrance at Starch Mill, Hunter Jackson at Crook. These guys, in 2011, put that barley in the soil on Islay. And they raised that crop, which we were then able to distill. So as we were looking out of the office window across the loch to Bamore, we would have seen the barley growing that Ian McKerrow was growing. We'd have seen those fields turn golden as we were making whiskey. We'd have been able to see that barley, we'd been able to watch that come in as we, of course, distill it. We mature it here, we watch it develop. It spends its whole life here on Islay. We bottle it. That Islay spring water from Octomore goes in to bring it down to bottling strength. The team here put everything together. When you're drinking that whiskey, it tastes good whether you know any of the story or not, but when you do know that story, when you do know where it comes from, when you do know everything about the barley variety, where it's come from, who's grown it, that makes a real difference. To be able to connect your whiskey back to the place it's from is really, really important. And that's something, again, we owe to the founders of the distillery, the guys who had the vision to want to do that, to not treat whiskey as a commodity, to not treat barley as a commodity, to actually take a pride and a place. And I tell you, as a whiskey maker, I've said this many a time, it's a huge privilege to make whiskey. And a huge privilege to make whiskey here at Bruichladdich and on Islay, an island famous for whiskey across the world. There's only 3,500 of us. We punch above our weight on this island. Everybody knows Islay. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in my job, I'm lucky that I get to go and I talk to people around the world about what it is we do, and it's a huge privilege. And so I see the impact that it has, and I'm incredibly proud to make whiskey here on Islay. But to make whiskey on Islay with Islay-grown barley is something that, again, just makes your heart swell. It's an amazing thing, and yeah, it tastes good whether you know the story or not, but when you do know the story, it really, really sticks with you, doesn't it? So, cheers. Right. The notes are all gone. I've lost it. I've lost the place. All over the place here. Should we have another dram? Yeah? Dram number 4. Dram number 5 for me. Dram number 4 for you. So dram number 4, we're going on to the bottom lay here, onto the left again. Dram number 4. This is a very, very special whiskey. This is a 2001 Bruichladdich. So again, back another decade, into the noughties. 2001. This is when, of course, the distillery was kind of brought back to life. New life was breathed back in. 2001 for me is always a really symbolic year because of that. And I think that's, again, part of the theme of what I want to kind of discuss today. It's those principles. It's remembering where you come from, remembering the things that are really important to keep going in the future, that DNA that you must just always come through. 2001 is a really interesting year. Bruichladdich comes back to life. Of course, you know, lots of the old team come back and start working at Bruichladdich, and these amazing things happen, you know, from a distillery that was derelict, a distillery that was mothballed, that was closed down. To have this whiskey back, and to think now that, again, 2001 doesn't really seem that long ago. Maybe I'm showing my age, but it doesn't really seem that long ago, 2001. But this is a 22-year-old whiskey that we have in front of us here. A 22-year-old whiskey, which is incredible. Represents 22 years of hard work. And if you don't kind of believe that, just look on the face of these guys along the front row, and they'll see what 22 years of hard work looks like. Or 34 years of hard work, if you really want to see something. But it's amazing. So this whiskey, it's 2001. It's a lovely expression. It's 54.4% alcohol. Okay, and I've collected these the samples. So some of this whiskey is maturing over in the corner of Warehouse 12 over here. Some Oloroso sherry butts. Through in Warehouse 14, we've got some first fill bourbon casks. And down in Port Charlotte, some second fill or refill bourbon casks. And these casks have been kind of brought together, married together to basically create this amazing whiskey. And you can see that beautiful color, that Oloroso influence there, that little sherry cask influence gives a little bit more depth of color. One thing that I'm sure you notice as whiskey experts, because you guys are all whiskey experts, one thing I'm sure you'll notice is there's a slight whisper, a hint of peat in there, yeah? So when you think about that little peaty note, back in 2001, Bruichladdich was slightly peated. So today, no peat in Bruichladdich. Port Charlotte, of course, 40 parts per million, very heavily peated. Octomore, just all the peat in there, all the peat. Huge levels of peat. But Bruichladdich is unpeated. But back in 2001, the malt that the team could get together had a slight hint of peat to it. It was about 8 to 10 ppm, 8 to 10 parts per million. And you would think again through the distillation, we lose about 2/3 of the phenols through distillation. So we're maybe down at 2 or 3 ppm in the spirit. 22 years later, we've still got that little whisper of peat. And again, you'll get it on the palate if you have a little taste. And you get that little bit of peat on the finish. Yeah? Hopefully you'll agree that is an amazing whiskey. Yeah? It's something quite interesting. We often talk about kind of what we do here at Bruichladdich as I am today. And we don't have huge resources. We don't have laboratories, kind of analyzing our spirit. But what we do have, and what we've always had here at Bruichladdich, is a team of people who are passionate, who care about what they do, and we pass on the skills of distillation all the time. So again, Budgie taught me how to run the stills, Alan taught me how to mash, I think. No, I don't think I ever did. No. That's why I'm not doing it now. But passing on those skills is really, really important to do. And it's not about the analysis and the things. It's about passion. It's about tasting whiskey. It's about using your instinct to make amazing whiskey. It's not about regimenting the way we do things, I think that's a really nice thing. And there's something about this whiskey, again, thinking back to 2001 and thinking about the way we do things. It's just a lovely thing that we do. We pass it on. We always pass it on. There's very little we do today that we see the benefit of today. So this whiskey was made by Budgie. Alan was mashing this whiskey, which is a lovely thing. Jonathan would have been mashing this whiskey as well, absolutely, just as well you're here. So to be able to taste this whiskey with the guys who laid it down, and this is where really it came in, because Budgie was on the stills, Alan, Jonathan were mashing. I was at university when this whiskey was made. Briefly, very briefly. That's a whole other story we don't have time for today. But, I wasn't here, and yet here I am kind of, and this is where Douglas had pointed out to me that, I take all the glory, I mean, I don't make the rules, it's just what it is, I just take the glory. But no, I think I'm always at pains to point out that this is a team effort, and what we do today, we may not see the benefit of for many years. And this is a really important thing about whiskey, and this is about going back through these decades and thinking about the drams we're tasting today. That new spirit we tasted, the guys who filled this last year in this room, some of these guys may be retired. They may be no longer with us by the time that whiskey is bottled. We are always laying down stocks of whiskey for the future generations. It's lovely for me to have my kids here today and to think about all of this kind of thing coming together. But what we do is always about the future generations, because again, I've always got to remember where we came from. The guys who taught me how to make whiskey. Jim, Duncan, these legends of whiskey making, giving us those skills, but also laying down the cash that we see around us today. I think that's an amazing thing. And it keeps you very honest when you think about these whiskies. It keeps you very honest because in years to come, the whiskey we make, somebody will open up that cask, fill a little glass, they'll nose it, they'll taste it, and they'll go, Christ, what was Adam thinking? God. Hopefully they don't think that. Because it keeps us honest. We're thinking about the quality of everything we do. And again, those 1%, those fundamentals, really, really important to always think about those, never forget them. I often think, when we do the band of gold and adding the water to the whiskey and all this kind of stuff, talking about non-chill filtration, caramel coloring, I've done that a million times. Maybe you guys have seen me do it half of those times. But for somebody, it's going to be the first time, and it's going to be the first time they get it, and that's really, really important, that we have to keep thinking about those fundamentals all the time and talking about those things. So anyway, glass number 4, lovely little bit of peat smoke in there, 22 years of making Bruichladdich. That's an absolutely incredible whiskey. The Oloroso cask, bring a little bit of nuttiness, a little bit of orange, a little bit of kind of dried fruit. So you get little kind of dates and figs notes in there. That's beautiful. That nose, again, 54% alcohol, that natural strength. It's gentle, it's delicate. But still 54% alcohol is quite strong. Have a taste. There's a beautiful sweetness. Again, that sherry cask sweetness, that dried fruit. The bourbon cask in there giving us that really, really kind of lovely vanilla coconut edge. It's starting to come through now. It's a beautiful whiskey. I know it's always really lovely to have single cask whiskies, but this is another point about whiskey, that when we take casks that complement each other and blend something, we can create amazing things. Now, this whiskey that we're tasting today, it will never see the light of day. This is just for you guys to taste here, just for me to illustrate the point about 2001. Think about those decades and going back. And it's amazing. It's beautiful to taste. And because you can't buy it all the time, because it's not a product that's out there all the time, it doesn't matter. It's just really nice to taste it now, you know? And that's a really important thing to remember as well. It's not always about consistency, about averaging everything out. It's about celebrating those amazing moments, which I think is a really, really nice thing to do. Right. We're doing okay. We're doing okay on time. We're doing fine. Should we move on to dram number 5? Yeah? Because, of course, we're going back another decade here. We are going back with dram number 5 to 1990. 1990. So can you guys remember what you were doing back in 1990? So, we've had a few drams, but can anyone remember the 1990s? Yeah? The music was fantastic. Everything was good. 1990s was to me really quite recent, you know. It still feels that way. The 1990s, so we're going to change that. So we've talked about our new spirit and the barley kind of influence. We've talked about the Isla barley. We've talked about that kind of 2001. We've talked about those principles, those fundamentals of making whiskey. And that's in all the whiskeys that we've tasted so far. And then we go back to 1990. So this is a very different era in Bruichladdich history, because we didn't have that visionary leadership. I say we. That company at the time didn't have that visionary leadership that we do have, that approach to making whiskey. And unfortunately, that led to the closure of Bruichladdich. So I'm sure many of you will know that Bruichladdich closed in 94, 95. 94 was the last year we produced whiskey. It was mothballed. So the company that owned Bruichladdich at the time decided that they did not need any more whiskey produced at Bruichladdich. They owned, it was White Mackay, who owned Invergordon. They had Jura Distillery in their portfolio, and they had Bruichladdich Distillery in their portfolio, and they decided actually 2 island whiskies producing, you know, whiskey. We don't need that. We don't need that much. Of course, the whiskey industry, again, even today is a very difficult thing to predict because, as I say, we're making whiskey for the future. We don't know how much whiskey you guys want to drink in the future. We think it's lots. We're pretty sure it's lots and lots of whiskey, but we don't know how much, you know? So if you want to get your orders in now, it'll really make life easy. But we do need some kind of crystal ball to be able to predict the future. But in years gone by, the whiskey industry would produce an awful lot, and then it would stop because it produced too much. And then it would produce an awful lot, and then so there was lots of peaks and troughs of making whiskey. And there was a lot of Bruichladdich out there, a lot of whiskey out there. So Bruichladdich was deemed surplus to requirements. And 1994, 1995, the distillery was closed. 12 people there kind of lost their jobs. 2, obviously, Budgie and John Rennie were kept on as caretakers and looking after the distillery, storing whiskey and looking after the stocks here. But the distillery was closed. And on a community of 3,500 people, losing those jobs is a big blow to the community, you know. Again, I grew up on the Rins of Isla, you know, up in Ardnave. Used to go to school in Port Charlotte and going past the Bruichladdich every day, and it was just quiet. Gates were locked, gates were closed, just somewhere you went past. It was a bit sad, you know. So it's, we think about those times, we think about the boom and the bust, and all the while, we think about where we are today and the whiskies we make, the Bruichladdich, the Port Charlotte, the Octomore, the Botanist Gin. We are employing over 100 people, so 130 people or something like that in this company. Now that's quite incredible. And it's because of how we think about making whiskey. It's that philosophy, it's that idea. It's because you guys are interested. If we just did the same thing day after day after day after day, just made Bruichladdich, just made it for blending, it's not that exciting. So think about all those whiskeys we've just tasted. Think about what we've just gone through and the whiskeys that we make and the barley varieties we use and the interest and the excitement that we breathe into whiskey. Back when this whiskey was made, this 1990 was made, there wasn't that level of interest in what it is we do. So we are really fortunate to be where we are today. However, it's not to say that this whiskey is bad. Have you tried it? Yeah? Good. I'm glad you're catching on. You're not waiting for me to tell you because you'll get very thirsty. Good. So, I do, you're right. So, 1990, I've made this whiskey in a kind of a black art style. Okay? So, I've got to be very careful not to give away too many clues here about recipes. Because, of course, black art is a secret. We don't tell you how we make black art and the casks we use. But I'm going to tell you some stories about this, or some things about this. Because this isn't black art. It's in the style of black art. So there's 4 different whiskies here. Married together to make this. All from 1990. Some of the whiskey is refill bourbon hogsheads. So filled in 1990, untouched until selected for this whiskey. Some was 1990. That around about 2007 had been recast into cognac casks. Some of this whiskey, and I'm not going to tell you how much, some of this whiskey around about 2012 was recast into Calvados casks. And some of this whiskey, back in 2009, was recast into Riesling casks. Is that all the components? Is that 4, 3? Who knows? So, bringing those different components together, create something that has a beautiful color again. With black art, usually you'll see a deeper, richer color. The casks I've selected here, we have very, very few of. 1990 is very rare in our warehouses. Of the 96,000 casks maturing at Bruichladdich, 96,000 casks. And I know where they all are. You shout out a number in a year, and I'll tell you exactly where it is. It's all on Isla. All on Isla. Which warehouse it's in, I've not got a clue, but there you go. It's all on Isla. It's really important. What was I talking about? Where were we? Whiskey. Yes, how many from 1990? Thank you. That's the reason you're here, Len. Thank you. How many from 1990? Around about 80 casks. So there's very, very few 1990 casks. But again, to pull these together, to give you something that has this amazing balance. Again, let's just have a little nose of that whiskey. And again, there's no influence of the strain, no influence of alcohol. That's just absolutely pure Bruichladdich. That fruit, you know when I was talking before about the fruit and it's kind of green, young fruit at the beginning, and as it ages, we become into like some kind of stone fruit, tropical fruit. For me, that peach and apricot is all over there. Pineapple, mango, this really lovely tropical fruit. Melon, got this lovely oaky coconut kind of notes coming through. Let's have a little taste. That's 43.2% alcohol. So naturally, it's a very low strength, but it's still got vibrancy, it's still got vitality. There's nothing flat. Again, this is a 33-year-old whiskey we're tasting. 33 years in wood, in these amazing casks, recast to bring more flavors in there. This is an amazing whiskey because it isn't flat, it isn't overly oaked. It's got this lovely vibrancy to it as well. You always find that with Bruichladdich. it retains that vibrancy. It's this lovely, lovely notes coming through. It's soft, it's gentle. That is an amazing whiskey. 33 years. Absolutely incredible. And as I look back through my notes here, there's always a point that I want to talk about when we think about this old whiskey. Because today, as I've touched on, today we think about every aspect of making whiskey, and we think about where the barley variety comes from. And when this whiskey was made, this 1990, we didn't know. The distillers at that time, the company at the time, didn't necessarily know where the barley came from, or care, actually, because a lot of that whiskey was destined for blending. So back, before Bruichladdich reopened, most whiskey produced would be for blending. Most single malt whiskey produced for blending. So we would get contracts, the distillery would get contracts in. They would have to produce certain amounts of spirit for different companies, and it was all going to blending. They would dictate what type of casks they wanted to be filled in some cases. So there wasn't the control. It wasn't like we do today, where I will go and buy casks that I want to fill to get specific flavors for the future. It was what other people wanted. So there would be contracts coming in, amounts to distill for other people, and a little bit kept for single malt. So this whiskey, when it was distilled, was not destined for single malt. It was destined for blending. The casks, they were probably refilled a few times. A lot of the whiskey that we inherited, that we looked through, we had to work on to improve the quality of wood, because the quality of wood was very, very poor. You'll see that when we use the casks, they come in and we have just the oak, just nothing on the end. And then when we use it a second time, we paint it white. So you've got a first fill, then we'll paint it this kind of lovely aqua color. That's its third fill. So generally we won't use them more times than that. But some of those old Bruichladdich casks we used to find back when we were recasking in the early 2000s, you would scrape away the layers of paint and you'd find it was grey on the top, and then red underneath, and then blue, and then green, and then white, and then black, and then white again, and then green, and then blue. So they've been used so many times. So the quality of the wood was not great, but the quality of the spirit is really, really important to think about. Because if you make good spirit, as I touched on before, you make good spirit and you put it into good wood, things get better. But you must start with good spirit. And all of the spirit that is distilled at Bruichladdich has always been good. We pass down those skills of distillation. Budgie teaching me. Alan teaching me. We pass those skills down all the time. So we make whiskey in the same way today as we did when that whiskey was made in 1990. I recently found, I stood here last year and I talked about all the old archive things I'd found and looking through things, but one of those things that I had found was some old mash books and stillhouse books from the 80s and the 90s. And when you look through those books, the temperatures were written in Fahrenheit, this kind of thing. Today we still use Fahrenheit. I don't know what temperature it is, but we'd write it's still the same numbers in Fahrenheit. The point is, when you look through those books, the mash size is the same, the dips are the same, the temperatures are the same, the times are the same. When the budgie's running the stills, the same process is being done. And we do things today, we know, that give us an amazing quality of spirit. We can taste the amazing quality of that spirit. So Bruichladdich has this legacy, this vein all the way through of making amazing spirit, even if it's destined for blending, as it was back in those days. And you think, well, it's going to be mixed with this and it's mixed with that. You're making it for somebody else. The pride that those men took in making that whiskey, no corners were cut. And we are seeing the benefit of that today in that 1990 whiskey, with that vibrancy, that quality. I think that's a really amazing thing. When you look back and you see the same things today that we did back then. That's a really, really important thing to remember. Always thinking about passing on for future generations. We're benefiting from that now. So again, thinking about the future and laying those casks down and laying down those principles of how you make whiskey to future generations will always stand us in good stead. Quite simply, if we don't make good whiskey, there's no point in us being here. That's what this is all about. So, let's raise a glass to very good whiskey. Sláinte. Now, We've run out of time, so you can't have that last dram. Everyone out, come on. We've got plenty of time. Don't worry. Plenty of time. I'm on page 9 of 11, so where are we now? That's it. Where are we up to here? No idea. Dram number 6. We're in the home straight, folks. We're in the home straight. Dram number 6. We're going back another decade, or into another decade. We don't have many casks from the 80s. This whiskey we have here is 1986 Bruichladdich. Okay? I'm not going to make eye contact with Lynn McEwen here. Because many years ago, when we bottled our 86, I told her this was the last. That's everything, Lynn. We've bottled it all. There's nothing left. There's always something up our sleeve at Bruichladdich. We always keep a little something back. So we have one cask of 1986 Bruichladdich. It is not as full today as it was this time last week. Okay? Because of you. Because of you. Yeah, again, the idea of going back to the 80s and thinking back through that time, I think this takes us a little bit further than some of those kind of ideas I was talking about with the 1990. When we think about this whiskey, and you think about, here we are, there's 250-something of us in this room. 37 years ago, when this whiskey was made, the guys who made this had no idea that we would be standing here. It would have been unimaginable for them to think that we'd be standing here tasting this whiskey. They were just filling casks and doing what they do. It's all for blending, all the rest of it. But to think we are standing here today drinking whiskey that's 37 years old, you know, that these guys made in a completely different era of Bruichladdich. I mean, I did think when I was making this kind of series of drams that a couple of years ago we did a time travelers themed festival. So I'm only like 2 years late to actually go through all of these different drams that's kind of traveling through time. But this is kind of what it's like. I mean, again, the 80s is a long time ago. You know? And big, no, not that long ago. Not that long ago. Not that long ago, actually. Okay, forget that part of the speech. That's fine. It's a completely different era, a completely different time. And being able to touch that, being able to go back and touch something and taste something and feel and experience something that was produced back then is absolutely incredible. So let me tell you a little bit of story about this whiskey. When it was filled into casks in 1986, this whiskey was filled into refill sherry casks. So big sherry butts, 500-litre casks from Hannett in Spain. They'd been used for whiskey a few times. And that spirit was filled into casks and, of course, stayed here. It was maturing down in Warehouse 2, and it stayed there for years and years. And in 2012, Jim, myself, and the other warehouse guys, we gathered together that whiskey. There was maybe 7 or 8 of these sherry casks left. We gathered them all together, and we mixed them all together, and we recast them. The casks were okay. The casks were good. But, again, Jim felt that they just wanted a little bit extra. So he recast them into first fill Pedro Jimenez sherry casks from Fernando de Castilla in Spain. And Fernando de Castilla produced amazing antique sherries. Amazing sherries, but amazing antique sherries. And this Pedro Jimenez had been in these casks for decades. And then we took them over here to Islay, and we filled this 1986 in there. We bottled that as part of our rare cask series. So a rare cask series where we bottled some 1984, 1985, 1986, the last of those vintages. If you don't see me next year, you know what happened, right? You know, I've told one too many story here. So yeah, these amazing rare cask series, amazing vintages, and I always used to love, you know, going to Warehouse 2 and letting people taste that 1986 and having that experience. And it was a bit of a wrench when we bottled it and we put it into through the bottling hall, and off it went around the world. And you know, we'll never see it again. It's gone. It's for you guys out there to enjoy. Incredibly rare, incredibly expensive whiskey, but beautiful and amazing whiskey. And again, touching the past. It's just amazing stuff. So I had to keep a little bit back. I'm sure you understand. You had to keep a little bit back. So we have this one cask, Warehouse 11 next door. I didn't think I'd be able to taste that whiskey again, obviously apart from this. But recently, we took a trip to China. And out in China, walked into this lovely bar, and we kind of where they sell some of our whiskey. And one of our brand ambassadors out there, a guy called Perry, was with some clients, and he was incredibly excited to see us. So on this trip was Alan, Simon, myself, some of the team out in China. This Perry was introducing us to his client, and he was delighted to see us because when you're in China, Islay is a long way away, you know. When you're in Islay, China is a long way away. When you're a long way from home, and you know, I'm a guy from Islay. You know, this is the center of the universe to me. This island is home. When you're a long way away from home, and you miss your family and you miss your wife, and you know, you're out there at 3:00 in the morning, you know, going around bars that sell your whiskey and chatting to the bartenders and all that kind of stuff. What a lovely surprise we had when this client of Perry's decided that he was going to buy a bottle of 1986 Bruichladdich to share with us. And so he did. He bought a bottle of 1986 Bruichladdich. And I don't want to know how much money he spent doing that, but he opened it up, and he was incredibly excited to pour that whiskey and taste it with us. And we had a dram with him, and again, to taste this whiskey again, absolutely incredible. Beautiful whiskey. And you start thinking about how this whiskey touches people in the most remote and the most, you know, again, you think about these guys filling this whiskey back in 1986 at Bruichladdich Distillery. Could they ever have imagined that we would be out there in China tasting that whiskey? The way that whiskey seeps into people's lives and connects people will always fascinate me. The fact that you guys are all here today, not to listen to me talking, but to taste these amazing whiskies. That always fascinates me. I think it's an amazing privilege, the things that we do here at Bruichladdich. Didn't hear that, but that's all right. That's all right. There's not much I need to say about this whiskey. Have you all tried it? Yeah. Good. I haven't yet, so. Cheers. Let's have a little dram. All you guys who traveled so far to come here and experience the day with us, Slàinte, thank you very much. Thank you. Good question. You'd think I would have learned that by now. The ABV is 42% in this whiskey. Okay? But it is just beautiful. Beautiful whiskey. So, of course, I'm going to keep a little bit back. Of course, we're going to look after it. There is not very much. What we do with it, I don't know. But it's lovely to be able to taste it with you guys here today. And we could talk about taste notes. And we could talk about all those things. But actually, just enjoy it. Just enjoy this whiskey. Oh, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's part one of the masterclass. We're halfway through, okay? We've got 5 minutes. No. I think we have run out of time. I am going to pick up my notes here because a few things I want to say before we finish. Again, the team, the warehouse team, who set this thing up, incredible. The whole Bruichladdich team. Yeah. It's for you guys. So the warehouse guys here sorted this for you today. Thank you very much. The whole Bruichladdich team, the wider Bruichladdich team, put on an incredible day. Months and months of work has gone into this day. You've got to enjoy yourselves, okay? That is mandatory today, okay? Everyone will enjoy themselves. It's going to be an amazing day. Again, just to take the opportunity, as we talked about before, that maverick vision, that maverick attitude of the founders of this distillery, they've left an indelible mark. They've left in lots of people. And so, Simon, again, thank you very much to you and the team who brought this distillery back to life. And we're all standing here today, or we're sitting here today because of that vision. And the future, again, we know where we've come from, so the future looks amazing because of the foundations that Simon and the team have built. So, again, Mr. Coughlin, thank you very much. A special little thank you, if I may, to my wife, Amy. I have an amazing job, part of an amazing company, but it does take me away, not just physically, but mentally. It takes me away from my family quite a lot. So, again, for the love and support of Amy, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And lastly, I would really like to raise a glass to all of you guys for your support, for enjoying what it is we do, for making it all relevant, and for drinking our whiskey and having a good time. So, to you guys, Slanjava. Right. Shall we go? The pipe band is ready. The bottles are ready to collect outside. The pipe band is going to march us down to the courtyard. We're going to go in there. It'll be like marching into battle. Well, let's do it, guys. Thank you very much.